So first of all, I did this. I made 8x10 glossies of myself. Hank Lonely is a play on Han Solo. So I got 8x10 glossies made of me in the classic Han Solo pose with the blaster from the promo of Star Wars. And I handed them out to cast members, basically anyone who would ask. And my tagline when I signed them was, "May space forever be in your mind." Hank Lonely.
That is Mr. Hank Lonely himself, Len Testa, and you're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on episode 183 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. My guest today is Len Testa, returning for his 6th appearance on the Tomorrow Society podcast. Len, of course, is the man behind touringplans.com, the Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. Formerly, Len was, of course, one of the hosts of the wonderful original WDW Today podcast, and he's a co-author of the Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World. When I reached out to Len this time, what I really wanted to talk about is where Disney is right now. The D23 Expo happened. There was some news there. A lot of things going on with Disney Genie Plus and with just frustrations that people have about what Disney is doing. And I thought Len's perspective was really interesting about decisions Disney is making and why they're making them. Also wanted to talk about Universal's Epic Universe, which is on the horizon now, about 3 years away, opening in 2025. Len's interest in that, because I think that may play a big role in what Disney does long term beyond 3 years, like in 5 to 7 years, based on how things go with Epic Universe. And of course, we had a few fun questions, including him talking about his experience on the Galactic Star Cruiser as his character Hank Lonely, which you heard a little bit about in the intro. So that was a fun way to end the show. So let's get right to it. Here is Len Testa. Well, Len, welcome back for, if you can believe it, appearance number 6 on this podcast. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, it's like Steve Martin on Saturday Night Live. This is great.
It's just, we're out of control here. So first of all, we're going to talk about a few big topics, in terms of Disney and Universal and all the fun stuff. But what's been happening at Touring Plans? Like, what are you guys doing right now?
We're working on a couple of things. One is we're finalizing the integration in of making Genie Plus suggestions in the touring plans. The idea here is that given the data that we've collected over the past year around how Genie Plus is being used in the parks, we should be able to tell you things like, here are the attractions in your touring plan that you selected, and here's when you should get Genie Plus reservations for each of these key attractions to minimize your overall wait in line. So we'll tell you, like, for example, that Jungle Cruise is more valuable than Mad Tea Party, and when you should get it, based on everything else that's going on in your day. So that should be coming out like in the next week or so.
Well, that's great. Yeah, because I can imagine how challenging was it to, you had planned for years and years based on FastPass and FastPass Plus to now kind of adjust to this new system. A lot of data, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, the thing with FastPass Plus that was good was you could make 3 FastPass Plus reservations in advance. And so for a lot of people, those were the only FastPass reservations that they used in a given day. So we didn't have to make too many recommendations during the day. We didn't have to say, okay, you're, for your 4th, 5th, and 6th FastPass, you can get these. But for Genie Plus, it's really critical to tell people, like, I know you're not showing up at the park until 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., whatever, but, the best time for you to get a Jungle Cruise Genie Plus reservation is like 7:45 in the morning, and you should really do that because it's going to save you an hour in line. So the ability to do that was something that took us a really long time to figure out. And the main reason is it's something that we were suggesting that happens outside of like your planned start and stop time. Like if you're not getting to the park till 11, we had never previously told you, here's something to do before you get to the park. And so working that into a scheduling algorithm is tricky.
Well, yeah, because I think about when I was going most recently in March that the hardest thing was going, okay, do I want, Frozen or Test Track, or do I want
Yeah.
Jungle Cruise or Splash Mountain or whatever, those kind of decisions that
Mhm.
like got me going, well, because and especially with Hollywood Studios, it like impacts whatever you choose first.
Yeah.
That, like at that park, you're basically saying, I'm going to choose this and I'm going to have the opportunity cost and miss these three or something. So that's
Right.
like another layer that it's different than if everything is just operating full blast.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we see over and over again. I mean, there are lots of guides to using Genie Plus, and there's lots of analysis on when Genie Plus reservations run out and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people who say like, this is the best Genie Plus reservation to get or whatnot, and we do stuff like that too. But for your specific situation, your specific day in the park, the answer to any of those questions, like which reservation should I get and when, the answer is always it depends, and it depends on what you specifically are doing. And that's, I think, the big advantage to a software based approach. I can give you as many charts based on average data that you want, but as soon as you deviate from one of those assumptions in the chart, nothing applies to you anymore. So the ability to customize stuff down to the individual level is, what we've spent basically the last 6 months on.
Well, yeah, because for our example, my girls were not as interested in Slinky Dog as they were in Mickey and Minnie. And even though
Right.
the thought was, well, Slinky Dog is the one you have to get, we were like,
Yeah.
we're just not going to do that because of spring break. You know how that goes. But then if from that guide, then you're kind of out in the wilderness if you don't have the software from there.
Right. Yeah. Or like, if you say, I'm going to write Slinky Dog first. I mean, that changes the calculus of what you do second, right? Same thing with like Peter Pan and Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. You could tell people, you should go to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train as soon as the park opens so that you don't have to pay for an individual lightning lane, right? But then depending on what they want to do second, you might tell them go to Peter Pan's Flight, which would be a legitimate, I think it's probably the most useful Genie Plus reservation you could get in the Magic Kingdom, everything else being equal. But if you're not going to go on it, then, then again, it depends. Where else do you want to go in the park? So that's super interesting. The other thing that we were trying to work out was the Genie Plus distribution times. So like normally for a lot of attractions, like Mad Tea Party, you imagine like a diagonal line that's just being drawn throughout the day, like going up and to the right. And it's basically like no matter what time of the day that you ask for a Mad Tea Party Genie Plus reservation, your return time is probably like 15 minutes from now, whatever now is. But there are many attractions that don't show that sort of linear distribution pattern. They have like an S-shaped curve throughout the day. And that happens when enough people get to the park and they realize, wow, the lines are really long. I need to get a Genie Plus reservation for the key rides that are important to me. So you see this really sharp increase in the return time. Like it gets farther out very fast, and then it slows down a little bit. And then you see the second wave of people sort of like catch on to that distribution time and who want to get it one more ride in before they leave. And then things sort of even out again. So modeling that in a predictive manner is also super tricky.
Right, because you have to be able to predict behavior of guests, not just availability,
Right.
which has always been the case, I'm sure. But now you have this kind of system that allows people to do things on the fly based on what they experience versus FastPass Plus, where it was like the first three, it was based on what do I want to do in 2 months, where this is, I just walked in and that looks, Spaceship Earth is busier than I wanted or whatever. First thing you see, what am I going to do instead?
Yeah, the first three, remember what the rules were on that, the first three pretty much set your morning, right? So unless you showed up without any FastPass reservations, which you totally should not have done, it was pretty easy to get all of your key attractions scheduled in the morning between what we knew about how lines worked in the parks and what you had for FastPass Plus reservations. Like that was pretty straightforward. Now it's like, well, what is the, Jungle Cruise Genie Plus distribution time at 7:35 this morning? Because we're going to make a whole bunch of recommendations based on exactly that. Is the ride running today? Does it really open on time? What if it doesn't open on time? Then what happens? There's a ton of stuff going on. And it's all last minute because of how Disney's implemented Genie Plus. I mean, it's taken us a lot longer to work to complete it than I thought, but I'm pretty happy with the results. We have to make it work in the app. We have to make it work on our website. We have to work on it. You have to make it work for like future plans, for today's plans. There's a lot of code.
No, I mean, it's daunting, especially because they've made changes to Genie Plus too. It hasn't been a straight, this has been the same. They pull things out, they add something. That
Yeah.
has to be something where you're not just, it's not like you're dealing with what they put in place last fall, basically.
Right. And, FastPass, by the time it was, right before it was removed, had been around in, one form or another for, 15, 20 years. So its operation was fairly well established. And not only that, but like it was difficult for Disney themselves to change the rules. So they tended not to, which is good because once you learned how to use it, you pretty much knew how to use it for as long as it was available. So Genie Plus, we're still working our way through a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, well, I think this relates to kind of what we're going to talk about. Not Genie Plus, but just the lots of changes we've seen recently in some ways, but not in others, because we have a few big topics. And what I wanted to talk about first was really, we finally led up to the D23 Expo, which, we didn't have it last year, due to the pandemic and everything else. Finally had it this year. And I kind of looked at it like, okay, this is their moment to say, this is what we're doing for the next 5 years or so. Right. And yet they were a little more reluctant than that. They seemed to look about a year or two in advance and not do much. But I'm curious, just up front, for your reaction to kind of how they presented it and also what Disney announced or didn't announce during this event.
So, the last couple of years, I've been leaning more and more on this theory of why Disney does things. And the theory is this. What would increase the share price the most? It doesn't have anything to do with theme parks in particular. If you look at the decisions made by all of the senior executives, including those in the theme parks, it's really about what will make a positive contribution to stockholders, not theme parks specifically. And so for things like, D23, it wasn't a complete surprise because of the comments that Bob Chapek and others had made around things like streaming services being a priority or implementing gambling or bringing gambling to ESPN, looking at things like that. The fact that they haven't announced any definitive new attractions for beyond 2024. I mean, in some ways it was mildly surprising, but, in retrospect, there was probably a 40 to 50% chance it was going to happen anyway. So we've got Tron coming up in the Magic Kingdom. We've got Tiana's Bayou Adventure possibly in Frontierland. We'll see. I think they're going to rename parts of Frontierland. We'll see what happens. In Disneyland, we've got Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. We've got Tiana's Bayou Adventure there. And is that it?
Well, with dates or with years, yes. Because they kind of announced that new multiverse attraction. But again, maybe 2025? I don't know. It's very up in the air.
I mean, the way that Disney works, I did a lot of corporate strategy planning for Fortune 100 companies in my previous life. And so the general rule that I use to tell people about expectations is this. If it's going to happen in the next year, you would know about it because money would have been allocated to it and people would have been allocated to it. So, and then 2 years out, if you're looking at strategy, the stuff that's 2 years out is generally like, here are the things that we need to do either to complete a project we're working on now or as a follow-on, in addition. If you're doing like a 2-phase project, then 2 years from now would be the second phase. Anything beyond 2 years is basically a wish list of things you'd like to do. So in the case of Disney, they generally operate on a 5 to 7 year project cycle. You can argue whether that's appropriate, but that's generally the cycle that they're on. So for them to have aspirations to open a completely brand new large attraction in 2025, they realistically would have had to start that in 2020 or at the very latest 2021. And at this point, 2022, you would have already had concept art. You would have had bids out to suppliers to build things like ride vehicles and ride tracks and things like that. And none of that has happened. So we should not expect any major attraction in at least the next 3 to 4 years from a Disney park, other than the ones that have been mentioned now.
Right.
It's just not the way that they work.
Yeah, well, the other one, I guess, is Moana Journey of Water, but I guess I don't know if I would call that major or not, but for next year, that's the other 2023.
It's not. It's a walkthrough.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. Attraction. It'll be nice to not have construction walls. That'll be nice. But in general, that's a good point, though, because if you think about it, just like how long, Cosmic Rewind or Tron or others have taken. Granted, Tron, the question of it could have been ready early, but it couldn't have been ready.
It definitely could have been ready
2 years earlier. It could have been ready now, basically.
Yeah. I mean, so I actually did a blog post on this back in August, right before D23, and I looked at the phases of construction that were left, how long they typically take. And I said, you can finish up the landscaping, you can finish up the concrete rock work, you can finish up the interior detail, you can finish up the ride testing in no more than 2 or 3 months, maybe by the end of the year. But then if you look at it from a marketing perspective, Disney has nothing to open in 2023, right? So why would they open this in 2022? Why would they open Tron in 2022 when they have nothing to announce in 2023? I mean, Moana, they can announce it. No one is going to plan a trip to Walt Disney World just to see Moana.
That relates well, though, to what you're saying in terms of the part of the D23 Expo, because I kind of came in thinking the things they might announce would be Dino Land replacement or maybe Tomorrowland at Disneyland, though I think I was too optimistic there. But they have this Blue Sky segment where they sort of talk about, we see sort of concept art, maybe for Moana. Well, I mean, they reference Moana for Dino Land. And then the Beyond Big Thunder, which that one just totally threw me for a loop. But I guess if you think in terms of 5 to 7 years for how long a project takes, if they're throwing things out now, even as Blue Sky, if these ever happen, they could technically throw them out there now, announce them in 2 years. Maybe they get opened in 5 years or something. But I don't know. I mean, should we really think too hard about that segment? Or was that more of, it's almost like they made it seem like they announced something big and then you finished and you thought about it for 20 minutes and went, no, they didn't really announce anything big.
I think they were, what's the term, vamping?
Yes.
They knew they had to show something. They know they had to talk for, however many minutes the presentation was scheduled. They didn't have anything substantial to talk about. So they talked about things that could happen. I mean, lots of things could happen, right? But none of those things that they announced are going to happen. And if they are, right, those things aren't going to happen because they pitched them at D23. They're going to happen because somebody sits down and does a feasibility study, looks at the economics of it, and then decides to do it. But nothing that you saw at D23 is a funded project or is actively being worked on, by a team of people whose job is to implement those things. It's basically we have nothing. We need to show somebody something. This is something. That's what we're going to do. I do think the one idea that was intriguing to me throughout that whole thing was the concept of like what's beyond Frontierland, for the simple reason that once you're willing to go beyond the berm and the railroad tracks of the Magic Kingdom, you open up a ton of extra area in the parks. And I think that is super interesting because like a Villain's Land is really appealing to me.
Well, yeah, I thought it was interesting, too, if you think about it in terms of you have Fantasyland up there, you have the Haunted Mansion, who kind of hangs out near Fantasyland. Behind, sure. I mean, yes, you've got to worry about Rivers of America and Top Sawyer Island and all that. But if you kind of go way back in that corner, it also could lose the dead end that is always the bottleneck over there. If you really expand, that to me makes more sense because, you can almost say it's like an offshoot of Fantasyland, and then you still have Haunted Mansion's kind of bridging the gap between that and Liberty Square.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes sense.
You'd have old Fantasyland, new Fantasyland, then dark Fantasyland, the villains area. And to your point, it would help with the dead end that is Big Thunder Mountain right now. I think there are a couple of challenges. One would be that's really far back from the main entrance, right? So that's like a half an hour walk, and not really half an hour, but that's a long walk back to the front of the park. Imagine how long it's going to take to get people to the front of that park. They would almost have to have a tram service at that end of the park to get people back to the entrance. And I don't even know what that would look like. The other thing is that if they expanded out that way, Disney just spent a ton of money redoing the area behind the Magic Kingdom to open up sort of the north entrance into the park. And that includes a ton of road work around Floridian Way. They could actually still revamp that road work yet again, if that's a viable idea. I mean, the Reedy Creek Improvement District is still a thing.
What are you talking about?
I know it's not going.
I know.
Anywhere.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's not. But they could redo the land and do the construction there and make that expansion project more viable. Of all of the things, of all of the hypotheticals that were floated at D23, that to me is the most intriguing. The other thing that it would open up is if they're willing to, if they're willing to think beyond the berm, you could have things like hotels back there, right? The area to the west of Adventureland, I think it's feasible to put another hotel there. And Universal's doing that with Epic Universe, right? A hotel either in or directly adjacent to a theme park. That would be super attractive for a number of reasons. Again, there's a lot of possibility there.
Yeah, dedicated entrance. And plus, that also might help to solve the fact, kind of like the International Gateway, but having a hotel there that then people can just enter there, and it's almost like you're being far away is not as big a deal if you have a hotel right there.
Right. So if you're staying, at the Contemporary, if you're staying even at the Poly, I mean, the Poly to the Magic Kingdom, at tops, it's like a 35-minute walk, which I know 35 minutes is a lot for a lot of people. But, if you can walk to the Contemporary, Bay Lake Tower, Grand Flow Villas, Poly, the new DVC building at the Poly, and the existing DVC buildings, that's a lot of rooms. If you throw another hotel on there, that's decent. Yeah, that makes the Magic Kingdom much more attractive. So, like I said, of all the things that were announced at D23, a Magic Kingdom expansion would, to me, be the most interesting. Yeah.
So do you think, you mentioned the shareholder part about it and the stock price, do you think a presentation like that, while it seems in theory to be for the fans that are live streaming or whatever, like, does stockholders, shareholders get excited by that? Because to me, I still feel like as a business, it doesn't really work for fans. I mean, I know some fans liked it, but I'm just saying it doesn't work that well for fans or really for business because, again, they're not really saying things that are going to increase revenue in a way.
Yeah, I mean, shareholders are looking at, what are you going to do for me in the next 90 days, in the next quarter? And none of that was that. So I think they're probably more interested in the streaming stuff and, in streaming. So, streaming day is really investor day. And if you look at the follow-up comments that the executive leadership team had after D23, where they talked to like Bank of America or other organizations, or even on the earnings call, they were entirely focused on streaming. And if they weren't focused on streaming, it was basically, when it came to the theme parks, how much money can we extract from guests without having to give them, make any new capital investments?
Yeah, unfortunately. So this leads me into Epic Universe, which I mean, we've talked about the other thing. I'm not as excited about a lot of things. I'm excited about this. And just an entirely new, technologically advanced park coming to the Orlando area within basically 3 years from now.
In 2025.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, before we dive into impact and everything else, I mean, how excited are you about having this just brand new park from Universal, especially, who have been doing some really good things?
I mean, super excited. I mean, we basically get a new theme park every decade or so. So this is like a once every 10-year thing. And I can't imagine when the next theme park after this is going to be built, right? So it's super exciting for a number of reasons. First is, I think Universal's been doing a really good job in capturing guests who are less than satisfied with the current state of, Disney World. Universal is doing really well there. In fact, if you look at our crowd calendar, we rate crowd levels from a scale of 1 to 10. The most common crowd level that we've seen at Universal this year is 10. The mode, if you will, for our statistics people, is 10. We actually have to change the scale because of that. And if you told me, that by the end of 2022, that one or two Universal parks will be higher than Animal Kingdom and Epcot in terms of attendance, or Animal Kingdom and Studios in terms of attendance, I would totally believe that. Like, Universal is growing up, and so they definitely have a chance here to draw some people, to capture more of the vacation days of people who are coming to Orlando than they currently do. So right now, if you're going for a week, you'll probably spend 4 or 5 days in Disney World and 1 or 2 days at Universal. And they have a chance to maybe not flip that, but maybe make it a 3 and 3 and 4 and 3. And that would be huge to Universal. So I think that's super exciting. The other thing is that some of the attractions that they've done, like the Super Mario Kart, they're targeting the right demographic for that. The 20 to 30-year-olds who all played that growing up. And I think that's a good property. It seems like they have a good idea on that. Yeah, so they have some good ideas. It's going to come down to execution. How reliable the rides are, how compelling the rides are, how much money they're willing to put into them, things like that. But I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I mean, a plus two, just you think about it, all you have to do is basically be like Nintendo, Harry Potter. I mean, the monsters, I don't know how much the kids know about the monsters, but those attractions I've heard a little bit about from like Alicia Stella and everyone look incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
How to Train Your Dragon, everything else. You just say all that, and a lot of people, including my daughters, are like, would be interested in that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, they're in. Yeah, it's going to come down to a lot of the logistics. Like I would say, if Universal is not good at one thing, it's the entrance experience, especially if you're not staying on site. Like it's just a hassle to park, to go through security, to walk through City Walk. Like it's the least enjoyable part of any visit. It's comparable to me to like going to the Magic Kingdom, which is when you think about like parking and then the monorail or the ferry and the security and it could take like an hour and more than an hour, and nobody wants to start their day like that. So if Universal can do better on the entrance experience to get people onto that first ride as quickly as possible, and they should be spending a ton of money on that research. If they can do that, they have a really good chance of getting great word of mouth from Epic Universe. The other sort of thing that's going to be a challenge is Universal's properties in Orlando aren't consolidated like Disney's are. So getting people from park to park is kind of a challenge. I'm only semi-joking, Dan, when I say that a gondola system across I-4, Skyliner, might be the best way to go on that.
Well, yeah, because that one of the big benefits they've always had, kind of like at Disneyland, is having the two parks right by each other, especially if you stay on site. And, as they expand, and if they in the future, they keep adding resorts, if they even would think, I would wonder if they might get a new park a fourth park, well, if you don't count Volcano Bay, a fourth park before Disney has a fifth park. But they're going to run into the same issues Disney has, where it's like you end up becoming almost a transportation company, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I'd heard, and I don't know if this is true. Have you heard this? That they're looking for dedicated bus lanes to get people between parks.
I think I heard about it a little while ago, but not recently. But I suspect that would be very smart.
That would be super interesting. Yeah, if they could do that, because Disney has dedicated bus lanes on Buena Vista Drive.
Right.
But to get to Disney Springs, and that would solve a lot of the transportation problems because nobody wants to spend 45 minutes stuck in traffic on I-4 going from park to park. So if they can, again, transportation issues, getting people onto that first ride as quickly as possible should be a major area of study for Universal. And the rides are generally pretty good. Their CEO has said that they are super invested in theme parks, that they envision it as a growth area for them, which Disney does not. So that's they have a chance. Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they do.
Yeah, me too. And just to see what it does for Orlando in general. And that's the thing one of the reasons why I thought Disney might push a little harder with D23 is if they were concerned. They wouldn't say it publicly that they're concerned, but if in the back house they're concerned about Epic Universe, but it doesn't seem like, based on their actions, not based on anything behind the scenes, that they are. And I know we think back to Islands of Adventure and how it didn't end up having much of an impact, but Universal's in a very different place, like you just mentioned. Yeah. So it surprises me a bit. This kind of happened with Harry Potter, where they were flat-footed, and then they kind of greenlit Pandora really fast and everything. And I wonder if we're going to see something like that again.
If you look at the calculus that Disney management has right now around Epic Universe, there are so many things that could go wrong with both Epic Universe and with any potential response that Disney plans out now, that it's almost like you would understand why they would wait. So let's take, for example, let's say Disney does nothing and Epic Universe succeeds. We won't know it succeeds until 2026, which is 4 years from now. The first question is the current management team actually going to be there in 2026? Yes. And that's like a 50-50 thing. So it could be future management's problem, right? But let's say that it opens in 2025 and it fails. Then Disney doesn't need to do anything because it's failed. But let's say it's something in between. If Disney wanted to mount a massive response to it now in order to match Epic Universe when it opens, they would have to spend $1 billion and a half now. And like Universal, there's a chance that could fail. So given all of those uncertainties, why would you do it? I think what they're waiting to see is this thing a success? Will Epic Universe be a success? And if it is, am I going to still be here, instead of retiring, to a point where I need to address it? And I think that's what they're looking at right now.
Well, right.
Why would you spend $1.5 billion on this now when $1.5 billion would be like 12 different series on Disney Plus? That's the calculus that they're doing. Or we could buy back $1.5 billion in shares.
Well, right. It relates to the shareholder idea again, because you said, even if they want to think for them way out would be a year or whatever, this is not a 2022 concern.
Right. And if you look at the expansions that they're doing internationally, a lot of that is driven by their international partners, the Oriental Land Company, many other companies that control the external parks. So that's why you're seeing $1 billion, $2 billion investments in parks outside the United States, is because Disney's not putting up that money.
That's true because, as we think about it, like you're talking about how right now Universal has their attendance is so good. But again, you won't really feel the impact. Like, let's say all the things Disney's doing right now, like the recent price increase, everything else, are bothering people. You don't really see that until you see bookings 6 months, a year, whatever out when people don't come back or whatever. Right. So if Epic Universe is great and people say, I want to come back to that, it won't be for what seems like probably an eternity.
That. Yeah, it'd be 2028, right? Yeah. So for people who are dissatisfied with Disney right now, who come like every 3 to 5 years, the impact of that isn't going to be felt until 2025 to 2027, which is an eternity, right? That's basically so far out for Disney that they don't even think about it. So that's that enters into their calculus as well. They're really focused on the next quarter, the next 6 months, and maybe up to the next year, but they probably do not think much beyond that, right? Because every year they've got to show increased earnings, and a substantial part of what they're thinking is, how do I boost earnings in the next 90 days, in the next 180 days, in the next 270 days, and in the next year?
Yeah, this is uplifting for me right now hearing all this. No, but
it's facts, right? I mean, it helps explain why the decisions are being made, right? It's not that they're short-sighted; they're just not interested in the things that we're interested in. We're interested in theme parks, and they're interested in shareholder the price of the share. Once you start thinking about it that way, a lot of things make a lot more sense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm curious. Just you guys, I know that Touring Plans does a lot of surveys after guests they go, and obviously you're doing it for people that go to Universal and people that go to Disney. I'm curious what trends you're hearing on those. I mean, first about Universal, because you mentioned that it's crowded, and I haven't been recently, but I'm planning to go hopefully sometime soon. But Velocicoaster, Hagrid's, I look at those as someone, it's just like, these look great. But are people having that kind of good experience that, from my view, it seems to be based on surveys?
Yeah, Velocicoaster is very highly rated. I think it's a great coaster. I think it's probably the best true roller coaster in Orlando. And granted, I haven't been to SeaWorld or Busch Gardens. So, but among the Disney and Universal coasters, I like Velocicoaster the best. Hagrid's is rated very highly, but downtime comes into play there. I'll say this. I've tried to ride Hagrid's 4 times, where I've made special trips over to Universal just to do it. All 4 times the ride has been down. I've given up.
Oh, man.
So it's one of those things, like, if I'm there and I've got an extra hour to wait in line, I'll try it again, but just I'm not making another special trip over there to do it. But that's super highly rated. In general, the hotels are okay for the money. They're definitely less expensive than Disney. People really like Express Pass. We've seen some interesting survey questions from Universal around not so much the satisfaction with the rides, but on how much easier it is to plan a Universal vacation than Disney. So they're actually asking those explicit questions right now, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, or on a scale from 1 to 5, how would you rate the ease of planning a trip to Universal Orlando? And then they'll ask the same question about Disney. And that's super interesting to us, because that gives us an insight as to what they're thinking around, like, advertising campaigns and how they're looking to simplify those processes even more. So whereas Disney's like, we're going to keep the park reservation system, even though it's really not needed, and even though everybody really hates it, we're going to keep it because it helps us with our labor costs. Universal's looking at it from a different perspective, like, how can we make it easier for you to spend your money in our parks? I understand both sides of that. It's just 2 different approaches. Universal is probably spending a lot more on data science and industrial engineering now than they have, 5 years ago, like way more right now. And you can tell the Halloween Horror Nights houses are better engineered now than they were a few years ago. Like if you look at throughput, the number of guests that can get through without sacrificing sort of the quality of the experience, they're doing a lot of stuff there around that, and it shows.
That's interesting to hear because if you think about it, like if they were trying, they have to know, I mean, you see the articles out there and everything else that about Disney in the general sense, whether it's, from fans or from the public or whatever, that there's an opportunity. And like, setting aside Epic Universe, even having the two parks right there and the hotels in the front of the line. I mean, I think about it and I think, how much I haven't had to make the decision, but I know it's easy to look at the 1-day Express Pass and say, well, that's so much more expensive, but it's the ease of I can just walk on versus I have to reserve things and all those elements when you go to plan a trip, they can add up quickly, even if there are attractions you may like somewhere else,
So I had this email from a reader, an unofficial guide reader, who hadn't been to the parks in a few years, like since Genie Plus opened up, and she's bringing like 7 adults over Christmas.
Oh wow!
And it hadn't been. So she said her husband was in charge of the budget. She was in charge of sort of like the day-to-day planning. And she said her email to me began with this: "My husband says we need to budget $1,800 for something called Genie Plus and individual lightning lane. Can you please check his math and figure out where he's wrong?" And I wrote back and I'm like, yeah, he was off by $4, but I'm not sure that that's the message that you wanted to hear, right? And so these are people who had stayed off site, had chosen to stay off site to save money. And when you look at the rules around staying on site or the benefits of staying on site now, staying off site pretty much requires you to purchase Genie Plus and individual lightning lane, because by the time you get into the parks, you'll get in 30 minutes later than Disney Resort guests. And so there'll be thousands of people in the park before you even step foot on ride number 1. Yeah, so I think that's where Universal has an opportunity. If they can simplify the process of getting their resort guests front of the line access, and that includes like opening more hotels, because that's part of the advantage they have right now, right? They don't have as many hotels as Disney, therefore they can do things like Express Pass to people at their moderate and deluxe hotels, right? But as they add more hotels and it becomes more complicated, you get segmented systems, right? And how do you keep everyone satisfied with that? So if they can figure that out, they have a huge advantage. The analogy that I like to give is Microsoft and Apple pre-iPhone. So before Apple came out with the iPhone in 2007, 2008, Apple had half the revenue of Microsoft. 36 months after the iPhone, Apple was twice the size of Microsoft and has never looked back since then. So if Universal can do something as innovative as the iPhone, but for theme parks, they have a tremendous opportunity here to be like the Apple of the theme park world. So we'll see. I don't know what that thing is, but again, I didn't see the iPhone coming. All I know is literally the first time I saw an iPhone, I thought like this literally, like my exact words were, "This changes everything." And you could tell as soon as the iPhone came out that it was going to be, something special. So if Universal can do something like that, I think they have a tremendous chance to rewrite or to completely flip the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it, I was really a late adapter even to smartphones. It's like, oh, I don't need it, and then you get one, and you're like,
yeah, there's this video, I forget where I saw it, but it's basically like the evolution of cell phones from 1990 until 2012. And from 1990 to 2007, it was basically like every conceivable rectangle shape that you can get except for an iPhone shape. And then once the iPhone came out, everyone's like, remember the Nokia 5190, the candy bar phones or the flip phones or weird sort of like rectangular things with flip screens and stuff that slid and right. But once the iPhone came out, everyone copied that design. All modern cell phones look like some version of the iPhone, and so that's the theme park opportunity there. It's not like Microsoft did anything wrong, right? So Steve Ballmer was the CEO of Microsoft back then. He had basically a monopoly in Windows. He had a monopoly in Microsoft Office. They were trying to make hardware, right? Not really succeeding at it, but I think they were not succeeding at it because they were trying to keep their monopolies, but they had great pricing leverage, right? Companies would pay whatever Microsoft wanted for Microsoft Office and for Microsoft Windows, right? I mean, you can negotiate, but only up to a point, and then the iPhone comes out, and now does anyone think about Microsoft when buying hardware? No. Does anyone think about buying Microsoft software if you don't have to? No, you use your iPhone or you use Google Docs or you use something else, right? So, like I said, there's a chance there. Just they have to be super innovative and take some risks. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, the landscape is set for it, but obviously, it's not easy. Even building a. I mean, it's one thing to add a cool attraction. I mean, like a Velocicoaster.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're talking a multi-billion-dollar investment, right? But it would be a multi-billion-dollar investment that would pay off like almost immediately.
It's weird because it's not. I don't want Disney to do poorly, but part of me is like,
no.
Well, maybe this is the push they need. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing that I want is, I want a couple of things, right? I want new theme park experiences. I want a better deal for not just shareholders, but stakeholders. So that's employees and customers and the communities in which they operate, right? So if you think about the constituents that come up with a theme park, I want those things. And then, we can talk about things like whether the middle class should be able to afford to go to Disney. And I think that's all part of it. So yeah, I want them to succeed. I still enjoy the theme parks. I think there's some very skillful people there. It's not how I would run the company, but we have different visions about what that means. So I mean, basically, the critique I have of Disney is the critique I have of society in general, in a lot of things. Like, let's not even talk about healthcare, right?
Oh yeah, it's a broader topic, but it's unfortunate that because it's this way, we have to do it this way.
Yeah, and so it's this way because don't get me wrong, I don't begrudge the money that Apple makes because I thoroughly enjoy my iPhone and I think it is the superior product, right? And two of the three favorite computers I've ever owned in my entire life have been Apple products, right? So, if you make it an ungodly amount of money through innovation and clearly better products, yeah, I'm down with that, right? It's this, it's this thing where we're just gonna, we're basically going to be Microsoft of 2007 and charge money because we can. I'm not sure that that's great. So anyway, we'll see. I mean, Universal has an opportunity. I've talked to a number of people behind the scenes who are working at Universal. I think they're doing really interesting research there. I think they're asking all the right questions. What's going to come down to is execution and whether management has the fortitude to back up those big bets. When there's some uncertainty around it. So we'll see.
Excellent. Well, before we finish, I wanted to ask you a few less serious questions if you are down for this.
Good, sure.
All right. Well, I reached out to listeners just to see if anyone had anything they wanted to know from you.
Oh my God, this is great.
And there's only one, but it's very important. So Beth Bramlett asked, she mentioned she wants to know more about the adventures of Hank Lonely. So what can you tell me about his exploits, Len?
All right. So Hank Lonely is a character that I invented for the Galactic Star Cruiser. We talked about this on the show?
We have not, because it was last time we talked was a year ago. Yeah. So
okay. So I went on the Galactic Star Cruiser on opening day this year. And as you know, Dan, you're encouraged to come up with a backstory. So just as a little bit of background, I had talked to a number of people who were playtesting or developing the Galactic Star Cruiser before it opened. So I had a general idea of what was going on. And so, when Disney was marketing the Star Cruiser, part of the thing that they were emphasizing was that the decisions that you make while on the Star Cruiser will impact how the story unfolds. And so, anytime Disney's marketing something like that, I want to see what the limits are. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just how I'm built, right? I had contacted a number of people who were going to be on the Star Cruiser with me. And again, don't forget, there's only 100 cabins on the Star Cruiser. There's maybe 200, 225 people. I had got enough people sort of like in my little group to where we had agreed we were going to try and mutiny and take over the ship. This was like 2 months out. right? Because can you, right? If the choices you make will affect the story, let's see how you handle a mutiny, right? And then as I learned more about the Star Cruiser, I realized that the way that the story unfolded, it simply wasn't possible. Not only wasn't it possible, but even if you had tried, it would have ruined the experience of the other guests. You can't do that, right? That's the limit of that's even I am not willing to take that step. So I needed to come up with another character that would also test sort of like the gameplay. So I had known ahead of time who all the major characters were on the Star Cruiser. I know how the improv worked, and I knew all of the major story beats. I actually had some of the food even before the Star Cruiser opened. So I kind of had a general idea of what was going on. So what I did was I came up with this character called Hank Lonely. The premise was that Hank was a science fiction film director who 40 years ago wrote, directed, produced, and starred in a nine-part epic science fiction trilogy called Space Robots in Outer Space. And through an unfortunate series of coincidences, every single thing that happened in the Star Wars universe, which remember, in the Star Wars universe, that's real life on the Galactic Star Cruiser. Every single thing that happened in the Star Wars universe actually happened in Hank's films. And so everyone thought that Hank's films were documentaries, and no one watches documentaries. That's why nobody knows about Hank's films. Okay, so Hank's story was that he had done this 9-part series. All of the characters were exactly the same in Hank's films as in the Star Wars universe with different names, but everything that happened in Hank's films also happened in the Star Wars universe. Hank was on the Galactic Star Cruiser to cast people for his 10th film, which was going to be a Bollywood-style musical. So imagine Star Wars, but Bollywood. So I had, since I knew all of the major characters, and I knew that they were improvising, I had developed routines for each of them. Like if I was going to interact with any of the characters, I had a series of stories and prompts that we could riff off of. And the idea being that, with my backstory and everything, it would be entertaining. The other thing was I was trying to make it funny because as I heard more and more about the Star Cruiser, I realized that no one was playing it for humor. And 2 days of no jokes just sounds tedious. Yeah, so I did a couple of interesting things. One was on the second day of... so first of all, I did this. I made 8x10 glossies of myself. Hank Lonely is a play on Han Solo. So I got 8x10 glossies made of me in the classic Han Solo pose with the blaster from the promo of Star Wars. And I handed them out to cast members, basically anyone who would ask. And my tagline when I signed them was, "May space forever be in your mind." Hank Lonely. And it was great. The cast members went along with it. In fact, there was this one cast member named Jen who decided, like as soon as I told her my backstory, decided that she was Hank's biggest fan. Like even as we were walking past each other in the hallways, like even if she was with other guests, she would point to herself and go, "#1 fan," like even in passing. So that was great. At one point, you have to run around Batu doing like scavenger hunts and stuff on day 2. And at one point I had like half an hour. So I went to meet Mickey Mouse. I got a picture of me and Mickey Mouse. And when I went back and showed the captain of the ship, my story was this, like, yeah, I joined the resistance because of what happened on the ship. We got captured by the First Order, but we managed to escape and crash landed in Batu. I was a little dazed. I kind of wandered the outskirts of Batu and I ran into this village of giant rodents. And I think I met the leader because if you look at what he's wearing, and this was, of course, Mickey Mouse in the Sorcerer Mickey's hat with the robe, like this is clearly some sort of ceremonial garb, isn't it? And I showed the captain the picture of me and Mickey Mouse, and for a brief second, she was like, "Oh, they didn't train me for this." Did not, So she's like, "Yes, I've heard stories of these creatures, but I've never seen one. What were they like?" So we riffed off of that. But the best thing I did was I went up to the stormtroopers in the afternoon of day 2, and I pitched them on the idea of being in my Bollywood-style musical. And so I started my pitch with this. Look, you guys may have the heads of a Q-tip, but you've got the legs of a dancer. And I'm doing this Bollywood-style musical, and I want you to be in my musical number. I need you guys to capture the romance, the adventure, the danger of space. Have you seen Robin Williams in The Birdcage doing the Martha Graham?
Yeah, I have. I've seen that.
Actually did the entire dance for him. Like, I need you to do Martha Graham. I need you to do Fosse. But I need you to keep it all inside. let me just say that the stormtroopers have absolutely no response to that. There was nothing in their training. It's funny. Kind of funny was a passenger came up to me, a passenger on the Star Cruiser, a guest came up to me and said, "That was the single greatest 90 seconds of my entire life. Thank you." I thought it was great. And I'll tell you what happened afterwards between me and a Disney employee. I can't say it on the air, but let's just say that because I did that dance, my character Hank Lonely is now lore on the Galactic Star Cruiser. So the other thing I did is for a while there, because I knew so many people going in the Galactic Star Cruiser, I was like, can you ask the cruise director, because the cruise director is a character on the ship, can you ask the cruise director whether they're showing space robots in outer space? And I've had like a dozen people ask, and every time the answer is the same, like, no, but we've heard a lot about it. So that was fun. Yeah, so Hank Lonely's, we're doing it again, actually, March 30th, 2023. Jim Hill and I are doing a Star Cruiser thing. We've got like 25 cabins booked. So we have like a quarter of the ship booked, which should be a lot of fun.
Does Jim have a character he's going to play on this, or?
He does, and he's got a whole backstory and everything. The good thing is you don't need much of a backstory. You just need enough to let the characters on the ship know that you're willing to play. Like when I was on the Star Cruiser, I would say about 20, maybe 30% of the guests just did not want to interact with the characters at all. And dude, it's $5,000. If you're not there to play the game, you should not go on that, because otherwise you're just basically in a windowless hotel for 2 days. The food is good, don't get me wrong, but it's not $5,000 good.
No,
you have to play the game. Yeah, so you need a little bit of a backstory to let the characters know that you're willing to play, and then the decisions you make along the way do actually affect what you see, and I'll leave it at that. You can't change the outcome, but you can change how you get there.
Well, I have two more quick questions. These are almost just like short answers, not from listeners. So I know recently on the Disney Dish, you talked about how you were only going to say positive things from now on about the Walt Disney Company. So with that in mind, what do you think about the current state of Epcot right now with that idea of only being positive?
There's so much opportunity for even more magic at Epcot, Dan. I am excited to see what Disney's coming up with for the future.
Wow, that's great. I'm based on that. I'm so excited. I can't wait what magic will be created in this world of discovery. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I need to know. We've been talking about a little bit about the future. So now, which of these things do you think will happen first?
Go ahead.
A fifth gate at Walt Disney World, a third gate at Disneyland, or a permanent attraction actually opening in the space formerly known as Wonders of Life? Which of these will happen first?
They're all such magical ideas.
You don't have to stick with the positive thing anymore.
Adventure and fantasy. I'm going to go with the Wonders of Life because it's the least capital intensive of those things, and so it could be done the fastest. Also, they've already taken one stab at it. Like I don't think the Play Pavilion is gonna happen, but the land is already there. It doesn't require things like extra parking. Yes, I'm going to say the Wonders of Life Pavilion is going to be the next thing to get.
I like how you took that silly question seriously, though. That was good. That was good, Len.
No. Yeah, I mean it's and the thing about it too is so it will probably if I don't think Epcot's going to get anything new anytime soon. I think they're going to cycle back to Animal Kingdom, get something next because it's been the longest. Then probably the studios, then Epcot again. So we're probably looking at 5 years out. Mm-hmm. But if you told me, 5 years from now, there will be something major at Wonders of Life, that's probably the logical next step.
Not imagination, if it's not that, you don't think?
They've already taken a couple stabs at it. That's the thing.
True.
And here's the thing. If they redid Imagination, it doesn't add capacity to the park. If they built the Festival Center, that's the other thing that could happen. You remember, because the Festival Center was the thing that was supposed to be in the... They could do that, and that's an increased source of revenue. So between that and the Wonders of Life Pavilion, those are the two things I think that are most likely to happen.
Well, this is good. I'm excited about some things we've talked about. Other things, you've been very fair, but kind of reinforcing what I expected. But this has been awesome, Len. So if people want to check out what you're doing, I know you're involved in a lot with the Disney Dish and touring plans and so much more. Where should they go, and how can they connect with you?
So I run touringplans.com, the website. You can always check our blog there, touringplans.com/blog. I also run the Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. And of course, there's always the unofficial guide to Walt Disney World. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Dan. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, Len, hopefully you can come back for number 7, and there'll be lots
Do we
more
get jackets
news.
at 7? Yeah, I get like a gold jacket or something, right?
There's lots of things will be mailed to you, I'm sure.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, like I said, thanks for the opportunity. This is always a hoot.
If you enjoyed this show, you should check out my past episodes with Len Testa, including last year when we did a theme park think tank. You can find that and a lot more at tomorrowsociety.com/podcasts with an S at the end. If you'd like to support the show, there's a really cool way you can do so through Patreon with a small monthly contribution. Get access to some really cool perks, including bonus podcast episodes. Go to patreon.com/tomorrowsociety to learn more. You can also make a one-time contribution by buying me a Dole Whip. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/Dole Whip to learn more. You can also rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That really helps people to find the show. If you'd like to get a hold of me, send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Follow me on Twitter at TomorrowSOC, at least for the moment. Facebook and Instagram at Tomorrow Society. You can go to the Tomorrow Society podcast channel on YouTube. The music for this show was written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I will be talking with Ryan Harmon of Zeitgeist Design and Production. Ryan tells a story about joining Walt Disney Imagineering in the late 80s, working on so many cool projects for Disney, Universal, and others. I think you're going to enjoy this show. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, and I will talk to you again next time.